Everyone keeps arguing which football is bigger, American football or the rest of the world's game. But I don't think people are even arguing about the same thing. They think they are, but they're not. Because when people defend American football, they usually defend one kind of greatness. And when people defend football, they usually defend a completely different one. That's why this debate never ends. Because one side is talking about scale. The other side is talking about meaning. And those are not the same thing. When people talk about American football, most of the time they're really talking about the Super Bowl. One night, one event, one perfectly built final moment that everything leads towards. And if we're being honest, sport doesn't do many nights bigger than that. The build-up is huge. The production is huge. The attention is huge. Even people who do not care about the sport know when it's happening. That matters, because in a world where attention is constantly split, there is something powerful about a sport that can still pull everyone into one moment. That is not accidental. That is what the NFL does better than almost anyone. It creates structure. It creates anticipation. It creates one clear destination. Every week matters because every week feels like it is pushing the season somewhere. There is a path. There is a narrative. There is a finish line. And when that finish line arrives, it feels massive because the whole system was built to make it feel that way. That is real. That deserves respect. And if football fans are being honest, most seasons in world football do not give you one single moment that feels as universally huge as the Super Bowl. That is one of the NFL's biggest strengths. It knows how to make one night feel like the center of the world. But then you look at football, and the whole comparison starts to fall apart. Because football is not built around one moment. It is built around hundreds of them. The World Cup, the Champions League final, El Clasico, the title race, the relegation battle, the cup final, the away end, the derby that means more to a city than anything happening anywhere else that weekend. And then you get into games that are bigger than fixtures. Boca Juniors versus River Plate, Rangers versus Celtic, Newcastle versus Sunderland. Games where the atmosphere starts long before kickoff and stays long after the final whistle. And this is where football fans usually make their point. Because for them, the sport is not just something you watch. It is something you live inside. It is inherited. It is local. It is generational. It is memory. That is a different kind of power. The Super Bowl can be enormous. But most people watching it are arriving for the event. Football, at its deepest level, is not really an event. It is part of people's lives before the event even starts. That is why the atmosphere feels different. Not just louder, different. Imagine the Super Bowl. Everything is polished, timed, controlled, built to deliver the biggest possible experience. Now imagine a Champions League knockout night, or a derby. You are checking your phone all day. You are hearing about lineups. You are talking about it before work, during work, after work. Kickoff comes, and within seconds, the whole thing feels unstable. No ad breaks. No pauses to reset the emotion. It just keeps going. That changes how it feels. And when it is a real derby, the game is only part of it. The streets feel different. The pubs feel different. The city feels different. You can feel the tension before a ball is even kicked. That is not just spectatorship. That is identity. And that is where football has something the NFL cannot fully reproduce. Because no matter how huge the NFL gets, it still feels largely like a sport you follow. Football, in many places, feels like something you belong to. But this is also where football fans can become biased, because depth is not the same as scale. Meaning is not the same as reach, and atmosphere is not the same as attention. A football fan can point to a derby and say it means everything, and they can be right. But that does not automatically make it bigger in the way the Super Bowl is bigger, because the Super Bowl wins on concentration. It wins on visibility. It wins on making one moment matter to an enormous number of people all at once. Football does not always do that. Its attention is split. Different leagues, different countries, different competitions. That gives it richness. But it also makes it harder to create one universally dominant moment. And that is where the NFL has the edge. It simplifies the experience. It gives people one clear story to follow. And in the modern world, simplicity is powerful. But football has the edge somewhere else. Because football does not need one moment to justify itself. It does not need one night to prove how big it is. Its power is spread out. Across countries, across generations, across ordinary weekends that still matter deeply to millions of people. And if we're being completely honest, most football fans would trade an entire NFL season for one derby win or one title-clinching moment. That sounds ridiculous to one side, and completely obvious to the other, which is exactly why this debate works. Because both sides are measuring greatness differently. American football says, look at the event, the scale, the production, the attention. Football says, look at the culture, the inheritance, the emotional depth. Look at what this means to people over time. That is why this should not be reduced to which sport is better. That question is too basic. The real question is, what does bigger actually mean? Is it the sport that creates the biggest single spectacle? Or the sport that becomes part of people's lives so deeply that they never really step outside it? Is bigger about one night the world stops for? Or something the world lives in every week? That is the debate. Spectacle versus identity. Scale versus depth. A perfectly designed event versus a sport that often feels too big, too messy, and too emotionally rooted to ever be contained. So which football is actually bigger? The one the world stops for? Or the one the world lives in?